In my strange, demented way, I think we're all murderers.
You're about to get a rare glimpse of a man who's been used to being in the spotlight.
You have a whole scheme.
What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about.
Swore to me. You promised me. You promised was all a lie.
Robert Blake has been an actor all his life.
Betty Davis, Humphrey Bogart, John Huston, John Ford, Fred Zinnemann, Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn.
He was charged with murdering his wife, Bonnie Lee Bakley.
I couldn't rouse her. First I thought she was sleeping. I shook her. I saw the blood on her nose. And I went for help.
Stay away from him, I told her.
Who was the he?
He, Robert Blake.
Blake says he's innocent.
God just kind of said, Robert, sit quiet. The truth does come out.
Bonnie was a very cold, calculated, kind woman.
She takes off a blouse. She peels down her stockings. It was good. She was a deadly sweetness. She was the kind of a sweet you wouldn't want to taste.
So who is the real Robert Blake?
He's a pussycat.
Robert Blake?
Robert Blake is a pussycat, yes.
What the matter with you?
I didn't say you killed her.
You didn't say I didn't.
Grab your coat and get your hat. That's the name of that tune.
Today I want to talk about Robert Blake and Bonnie Bakley. Robert Blake was a child actor who had a long, successful career in Hollywood.
Where do I fit in? I got you figured for a natural-born killer. Don't you just pull a trigger and somebody dies.
Bonnie was a con artist, some might say. Robert and Bonnie were married, but not for long because somebody shot Bonnie to death. Robert was actually arrested for Bonnie's murder, but then he was acquitted. This case is insane. Some people think Robert did it. Some people think he's totally innocent. So I want to do what I usually do on my channel, which is I want to give you guys the facts. We'll discuss the theories and then you can decide for yourself. This video is sponsored by COMETEER. COMETEER is a coffee subscription service, and what's really cool about it is it's actually innovative because this coffee, it's frozen and it's very easy to thaw out. It's the only coffee that's flash frozen to lock in freshness. And what I like about it is for the quality, the price is amazing. It's less than $2 a cup. They have some of the best brands that I already love, and it's super versatile. You can make it hot, iced, lattes, mochas, and just give it a nice little mix. And there you have it. Oh, look at Nali.
You want some of Mama Latte? You can't have caffeine. You're a dog.
Wow, this is actually really good quality. I'm impressed. Happy juice. Shipping is always free. For a limited time, you can get this tumbler for free. It's worth $30. It's one of those tumblers that keeps the temperature in, but also there's a splash guard. Oh my God, coffee on the go. I'm already halfway through. So anyway, thank you guys for sitting through that, and thank you to COMETEER for sponsoring this video. So the whole thing started on May 4th, 2001. It was in Studio City, California, and Robert and Bonnie went to Robert's favorite spot. It was an Italian restaurant called Vitello's. According to Robert, they had their meal and left the restaurant. They walked to the car when Robert realized that he forgot something at the restaurant, his pistol. He had his pistol on him and he forgot it at the restaurant. So he leaves Bonnie in the passenger seat. By the way, the car was parked on a side street around the corner from the restaurant behind a dumpster. So he leaves Bonnie in the passenger seat. He goes back to the restaurant to get his gun. And then he says when he got back, Bonnie was shot dead in the passenger seat where he left her. And so that's when he ran to a nearby home, banged on the door and told them, like, please call 911. Someone shot my wife.
9:30 at night, I heard a loud banging on the door. I was just stunned to see Robert Blake. You gotta help me, you gotta help me, you gotta get an ambulance, you gotta call 911.
My name is Sean Stanek. So, do you know who the actor Robert Blake is?
Yes.
He walked up here and He's screaming severely. I know him from the neighborhood here. Okay.
He was in my house and he was pacing back and forth, and his eyes, they looked black and dilated.
Get an ambulance. She's conscious. Is she conscious, Robert? No. She's not conscious. Is she breathing? Is she breathing? Yeah, they're coming. They're coming.
I thought we were going to go out together and try to help, and he leaves. And I go, where are you going? He says he's going to go get help.
A gentleman by the name of Mr. Blake who's got his wife in the car. Need an ambulance right now. My wife. Get an ambulance here.
Are you witnesses?
I don't know anything, man. Somebody just came to my house and said, call 911. My wife is bleeding.
Now, Sean says, I open the car door, I sit next to her. He's talking about Bonnie. And I pull her up. I tell her, squeeze my hand. But all she's doing is gurgling. And there's just massive amount of blood everywhere. When I saw Robert Blake had a gun, I thought to myself, we're in deep defecation. Okay, you know what I'm trying to say. The gun that Robert had in his hand when he went to the restaurant, got the gun, that was not the murder weapon. Actually, the murder weapon was found in the dumpster. Remember when I told you the car was parked next to a dumpster? Yes, in that dumpster they found the murder weapon. Now this was, quote, an unusual vintage revolver, and the serial number was scratched off, so they couldn't trace the gun to Robert or anyone for that matter. The only thing we know is that that was the gun used to shoot Bonnie. So Bonnie died and the investigation began. And soon after the investigation began, police realized that Bonnie had a lot of enemies.
She had any number of people who she ruined who are capable of doing this crime.
Not on my behalf, but you're lucky somebody ain't out there to pull a bullet in your head.
Bonnie was extremely evil. She was a con artist. She was a black widow from hell.
She was a rotten person. Honestly, when I found out she was murdered, I was happy.
To understand what happened to Bonnie, you need to understand who Bonnie was. Bonnie was, well, different things to different people, okay? Her daughter says she was a loving mother.
Holly Gorin is Bonnie Lee Bakley's daughter.
I miss her so much. She was a really incredible mother. She was everything to me. She was my best friend. She was always by my side. She supported me in anything. She allowed us to grow and learn any way we wanted to. She did do things that most people wouldn't approve of, but it wasn't all that she did. She was a shrewd businesswoman.
But her victims say she was a con artist, a scammer who wanted to be famous, who wanted to be rich, and who did whatever it took to get there, no matter who it hurt. You may or may not have guessed this, but Bonnie had a messed up childhood. Don't we all? Most of us, some of us, I don't know. Her father was an alcoholic and she was kind of bullied for being poor and for having an alcoholic father. She ended up being raised by her grandmother, but something happened when Bonnie was 10 years old. According to Robert Blake, quote, I think Bonnie, at a very, very early age, as a child, became a lost soul. And she told me that. When she was 10 years old, she was already doing stuff with men. When she was 11 years old, there was an incident that happened at the nudist colony. Yes, turns out Bonnie and her family lived near a nudist colony. And I guess her and her sister, when Bonnie was 11, her and her sister heard that the colony was having a clothes-on swimming party or swimming thing, whatever. And so they go there, but then they realize that it's actually closed off. Bonnie's sister says that she thought that was the last time they went there, but turns out Bonnie went back and would swim nude. And then some of the other nudist people there would take pictures of 11-year-old Bonnie and sell them. And this began this sort of weird relationship that Bonnie had with porn, because at first she was a victim, but then as time went on, she would actually sell these pictures of herself and of others. By the time she was 16, she had dropped out of high school and went to New York to pursue a career in modeling. This began her whole idea with wanting to become famous. She wanted to be a model or a singer or an actor. So in New York, she reinvents herself. Instead of Bonnie Bakley, she becomes known as Lee Bonny. And she did get like a few little roles as an extra and things like that. And then she ended up marrying the first of her 8 or 9 husbands. I think Robert Blake was her 9th husband, 8th or 9th. So she marries this guy. His name is Evangelos Polonakis. No. I added extra stuff. It's Evangelos Polakis. Evangelos Polakis. Anyway, so Evangelos was an immigrant and he was in the United States and his visitation was about to run up and he wanted to stay, so he needed what? A green card. And so he wanted to marry Bonnie for a green card, and Bonnie was like, okay, well, give me some money and I'll marry you and you get the green card. Well, what Bonnie ended up doing was one of her first scams. She married him soon after, like almost immediately after when she got the money, she divorced him and disappeared. He ends up getting deported and she still has the money and whatever, divorced, she's fine. Then when Bonnie was 21, she ends up marrying her first cousin, Paul. And the reason why she did this was really weird. She was obsessed with this famous singer,
Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
Jerry Lee Lewis. I found out, ended up marrying his first cousin, who was 13 when he was 23, so double barf. She was inspired by that. Bonnie was, I guess, inspired by that, so because she was a huge fan. So now she wanted to marry her first cousin because he did it, and so she does. She marries Paul.
She said if Jerry Lee Lewis could marry his cousin, she could marry her cousin.
Marrying her cousin Paul and having 2 children.
Now, the thing about cousin Paul is he was kind of an asshole. He was angry all the time. They say he was abusive. He didn't work. And while he was not working at home, Bonnie was scamming. Yes, she was doing this thing called Lonely Hearts ads, where she would post an ad in the newspaper about like wanting someone, and then someone would reach out. She would then send them pictures, nude pictures. They would become infatuated with her. She would ask for money or ask to be put on their will or their life insurance or something like that. And she would get the money and she would disappear, get the money and disappear. And she left a trail of all these scorned, bitter men or their family members if they were really old and they died and they found out the life insurance policy or the will went to her and they're like, who is she? They would get upset.
Bonnie supported herself doing this for years.
These are letters from men she was scamming. Right, exactly.
It wasn't a victimless con.
He was 82.
William read this personal ad placed by Bonnie.
Hi guys, I'm young, pretty, sexy, and I do like older men. He was lonely. He just wanted some attention.
But one day, Bonnie surprised William Weber by showing up at his home in Florida and convincing him to marry her. After 1 week of marriage, Bonnie disappeared.
Bonnie was in my grandfather's life for 1 week and basically walked off with $80,000.
And so she had a bunch of people that were mad at her for scamming them. Bonnie's scamming ways really paid off. She ended up with a lot of money. She ended up buying several homes in Memphis, Tennessee, in Los Angeles, whatever. We'll get to all that later. But she was doing pretty well for herself financially, but still, she wanted that fame. She didn't have that, and she still wanted it. She's still upset with Jerry Lee Lewis.
Great balls of fire!
And so she ends up divorcing Paul. She leaves the kids she had with Paul and she goes to follow Jerry Lee Lewis, the singer who married his 13-year-old first cousin. She goes from concert to concert, basically like a groupie, and she manages to weasel her way in. Then Bonnie gets pregnant. And what does she do? She goes to all these tabloids and she tells them she's pregnant with Jerry Lee Lewis's love child. When the child was born, on the birth certificate, Bonnie put father undetermined, and she named the baby Jerry Lee. But then they did a DNA paternity test and turns out Jerry Lee was not the father, and she was like super embarrassed. She stopped pursuing him. He stopped talking to her. But now she was getting bolder and she was about to get caught several times. In 1995, she was arrested for bad checks and she gets fined, and they make her work on a penal farm, which I guess is like the penal system, but it sounds like a farm of penises. Then she starts advertising that she's a trisexual, meaning she'll try anything once. And so she said she had an anything goes policy. So she starts getting these more clients and scamming them, taking their money, taking their identity, writing bad checks. She ends up getting caught up for that and arrested again. She gets arrested in Memphis for drug possession. So she has all these arrests. She serves this time. She's in the South. Like, these are all happening in different areas in the South. And she gets out of jail and she decides, you know what? I'm done with the South. I'm done with this. I'm going to Hollywood. She even recorded a single.
Unfortunately, although Bonnie was pretty, she wasn't talented.
Hello, my name is Lee Bonny. God only knows what he means to me.
After a while, she realizes that, you know, her career in Hollywood is probably not going to go anywhere, but she decides, I'm not going to be famous myself. I'm going to marry someone famous. And she sets her sights on who? Dean Martin. This is a famous old Hollywood actor. The thing is, Dean Martin was 78 years old, so before she could get her claws into him, he died. But she was in Hollywood and she was on the prowl. So they found her address book and it read like a who's who of Hollywood.
This is Bonnie's address book.
Addresses of people Bonnie would soon begin hunting down.
Warren Beatty, Robert De Niro, Peter Fonda, Clint Eastwood, Robert Redford. She always told me that you had to sleep your way to get to the top.
Then, Bonnie finds her next target. You know the actor Marlon Brando? Not him, his son, Christian Brando.
His name is Christian Brando, son of screen legend Marlon Brando. He was Bonnie's boyfriend too, who pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter in 1991 for killing his sister's boyfriend.
What the you think you're doing?
Here he can be heard talking to Bonnie.
It's bull, man. What is going on?
Brando warns Bonnie that her scheming could catch up with her.
But you're lucky somebody ain't out there to pull a bullet in your head.
Now, Christian Brando, well, he shot someone and killed them. It was the boyfriend of his half-sister. This was in the 90s. I think it was 1990. He pled guilty to manslaughter and he ended up spending 5 years in prison. Now, according to Bonnie's sister, quote, this is what Bonnie did. She said, what she did was she sent nude photos to him, FedExed them to him while he was in jail. And then they met when he got out of jail. And that was it. That's all it took. Christian Brando's now out of jail and he's got this relationship going with Bonnie. And at the same time as she's got this relationship with Christian Brando, she meets none other than Robert Blake. This was in 1999 and they met at a jazz club. And the next thing you know, Bonnie's pregnant. But at first she says it's Christian Brando's baby. But the truth is, she didn't know whose baby it was. Technically, it could have been Christian's or Robert Blake's. So first she says it's Christian. Even on the birth certificate, she names the child Christian Shannon Brando. And then, though, she tells Christian Brando, by the way, it's possible that this baby may not be yours. And Christian is very pissed.
Brando was reportedly furious.
And he get me all charged up thinking I got a baby and this, that, and the other thing. So what's this bullshit about the kid?
What do you mean?
It's not my kid. You're going to game me, Robert Blake? You're going to game him?
But then Bonnie ends up taking a DNA test and finds out that the father is actually not Christian Brando, but Robert Blake. And then Robert Blake gets pissed.
You have a whole scheme.
What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about.
Swore to me. You promised me. You promised. Don't worry, Robert, no matter what. I will have an abortion, and that was all a lie. Not a little lie. That's a big lie. The kind of lie that God looks down and says, hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Robert Blake was pissed because, first of all, she told him that if they ever got pregnant, that she would get rid of the baby. and now she was pregnant and she was acting like she wasn't going to get rid of the baby. And so I guess Robert felt trapped, betrayed, lied to, and Christian is upset that she told him it was his and then it wasn't his, so she's cheating on him. And then now Robert, it's his, but he doesn't want it to be his, so it's all messed up. In the end, the baby's name was changed from Christian Shannon Brando to Rose Lenore Sophia Blake. Then Robert decides that he is going to marry Bonnie and like make an honest woman out of her or whatever. It's his second marriage. It's her 8th or 9th, but Robert Blake had some conditions for the marriage. He wanted her to sign some things. First, he wanted her to sign a temporary custody agreement where he had custody of the baby and she had supervised visitation, and they had to like do this permission and paperwork about Bonnie's friends being around the baby. So you could tell that already Robert Blake didn't really trust Bonnie or her lifestyle. Bonnie's lawyer was like, no, don't sign these. These are very lopsided. But Bonnie, so desperate to marry a celebrity, didn't listen to her lawyer and signed the paperwork anyway in October, and in November they were married. Then he had a private investigator follow Bonnie to try to figure out more about her. And then during this, he finds out that she's still doing those lonely heart scams as they're married. And so I guess he's starting to see a different side of Bonnie. He's feeling trapped by Bonnie. They weren't even living together. He had Bonnie and the baby living in the guest house of his home. Well, 6 months after this wedding, Bonnie would end up shot dead. The baby Rose, she went to live with Robert Blake's daughter, like an older daughter.
I like this picture. That's my daughter, Delina. That's Rosie. When Rosie was 2 weeks old, I held her in my hands and made a deal with God. If you please take care of Rosie, I will never, ever ask you anything again.
Right now, Rosie is living with Blake's daughter, Delina, who has full custody. Blake is perfectly happy with the way Rosie is being raised.
Like all children are God's angels. God's angels. And they come with the message that there's still hope for all of us. And that's the name of that tune.
She was well cared for by all accounts, but I think that gives you an idea of how little Robert wanted to have another child. For almost a year after Bonnie's death, the case remained unsolved. Rumors were swirling. A lot of people thought Robert may have done it because like he was there and he was unhappy with the marriage. He felt trapped and, you know, he leaves, she gets shot, he comes back, like how convenient. There was even a joke that I found on YouTube where they were making a joke about how like perfect this situation was or how lucky he was.
But Gary Shanley would say, okay, so Robert Blake came out, left his wife in the car, went back to get his gun, came back to the car, and she was dead. Come on. Who's that lucky?
As much as people thought Robert may have done it, at the same time, there were all these other suspects, and it was like crazy. It was almost like there were too many suspects because so many people had grievances with her. People were talking about she had it coming and all this. It was crazy. 11 months after her death, a shocking, dramatic arrest.
Let me interrupt you a second, Harlan Charles. Someone, apparently Mr. Blake, handcuffed, has been put into that sheriff's car, police car there.
So this is Robert Blake under arrest. Blake was charged with his wife's murder.
This is a bodyguard of Robert Blake's now being arrested here.
Blake is facing life in prison with no parole.
And I found this press release that the police released at the time of the arrest, and they say at 5:30 this afternoon, detectives with the LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division arrested actor Robert Blake for the murder of his wife, 44-year-old Bonnie Lee Bakley. Detectives will present the case against Blake to the LA County District Attorney's Office on Monday. It is anticipated he will face 1 count of murder with special circumstances, use of a firearm, and 2 counts of solicitation for murder. Detectives have also arrested 46-year-old Earl Caldwell for conspiracy to commit the murder of Miss Bakley. During the nearly year-long investigation, detectives carefully examined over 900 items of evidence linked to both Blake and Bakley, including letters, records, photographs, and other physical evidence. Detectives also interviewed more than 150 people. The investigation took detectives all over the United States. They went to like 20 states. They say that no other case in the department's history required such extensive travel, and that they followed up on more than 150 clues, and that all other possible suspects were investigated and have been eliminated. They said that they developed compelling and conclusive evidence that Robert Blake killed Bonnie Lee, and his bodyguard, Earl Caldwell. They said that he met Robert Blake about 5 years ago and was employed at a car stereo alarm shop when he worked on his vehicle. And then 2 years ago, he hired him as a handyman, and he was also a part-time bodyguard. One of the biggest pieces of evidence that the police had were witnesses, stuntmen that worked with Robert Blake, who say that he asked them if they would kill Bonnie, that he would pay them, and please kill my wife. Police say that eventually he decided to do it himself, or potentially it seemed like maybe his bodyguard may have been involved as well. While Robert Blake was in jail, before he got bail and posted bail, he did an interview with Barbara Walters.
Barbara Walters landed the interview with Robert Blake, of course.
Robert?
What did he have to say?
I'm glad to see you.
Hi. I'm okay.
Let's start, gentlemen.
Boy, you're a boss.
Well, they're used to me by now. Robert, you've been in jail now for almost a year. How are you doing?
I'm in a cement box in a jail.
And you came back to the car and found your wife shot to death. What did you feel?
God, I wish I could answer you.
Robert, are you innocent?
Of course I'm innocent.
What if you are found guilty?
What are they gonna do to me? What are they gonna do to me that they haven't done already? They took away my entire past. They took away my entire future. What's left for them to take? They're gonna take my testicles and make earrings out of them?
After about a year in jail, he was given the opportunity to post bail, which he did, and then he was put on house arrest. When he was on house arrest, he did this interview with 48 Hours.
He was set free on bail. And these days,
when you were sweet,
he does have to wear an ankle bracelet.
Is that a Cartier?
Your foot can go over there, and the sheriffs won't come and get you. Every night I called him, and he kept me alive. And I pick up my phone. Hello? Hey, Annie.
His 85-year-old neighbor, Annie.
I don't think I want him to go away.
I love you, Annie. Meatballs?
Everything here is all so lovely.
I hate these things. Ain't the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Let's see how much fight is left in this little busted up old dog.
Now it was time for Robert Blake's trial. Now keep in mind, I'll give you some context, okay? This is LA, and this is the first celebrity murder case in LA since O.J. Simpson. So it was fresh on everyone's mind. And I just want to mention that because a lot of people think the context of the OJ case played a factor into how things played out. Played a factor or factored in? Played into and factored in, but I put them together. Why? I don't know. The trial began and the prosecution basically came out and they said, listen, Robert Blake felt trapped. He didn't want this baby. He didn't want this marriage. He didn't want Bonnie. But she had got him trapped with this baby, and now he felt obligated to be with her, but he didn't want to. He found out that she was a scammer, and so that's why he took her out, so he could be free. It also came out in trial that Bonnie would secretly record a lot of these phone conversations that she had with celebrities, and so they played tapes of her recording Robert Blake.
Bonnie recorded at least one angry phone call.
You got it all
Then came time for the witnesses, the stuntmen that I told you about.
Duffy Hamilton, who worked with Blake on Beretta.
One of his scenarios was that she could be snuffed while sitting in the car.
He said, we're going to hire a doctor, we're going to abort her, and if that doesn't work, we're going to whack her.
We're going to whack her?
Yes.
Why would three individuals who don't know each other say these things if it wasn't true?
One of them, in 2 interviews with the police department, emphatically said, Mr. Blake never solicited me to murder anybody. The other one has now admitted that Robert Blake never asked him to kill anyone. The third one says that Robert at some point said, I might want to kill her, and the next day he changed his mind.
And then the defense came out and they attacked the credibility of these witnesses. They found out like that they had used drugs in the past. They brought it up. They ended up making them admit on the stand that they had used drugs before. And I guess that ruined their credibility.
Their testimony was so lacking in credibility and they contradicted themselves so often, I think they're already ruined.
We have evidence to corroborate the things they say.
A potentially incriminating phone card bought by Blake at this 7-Eleven. He used it to make more than 100 calls from his home phone, dialing more than 30 digits to make a local call. And he placed those calls to these three men, now implicating Blake in Bonnie's murder.
Then the interview with Barbara Walters, they ended up playing that for the jury as well. And a lot of people felt like that humanized Robert, but it was actually the prosecution that introduced that. So some people say that backfired. And then another important thing too is he did not take the stand. Robert Blake did not take the stand. And then the most important thing, which a lot of people talk about, is the lack of physical evidence.
Shelley Samuels is the Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney.
Are you convinced that he is the shooter? He is the man who pulled the trigger?
I am convinced. All of the evidence that we have in the case points to that.
There are no fingerprints?
True.
There is no DNA?
True.
The murder weapon couldn't be traced back to anyone. Remember when he said he left his gun at the restaurant, went back to get it? They say he was carrying this gun because Bonnie had a stalker from all those people that she screwed over, and he was trying to protect her, and that it could have been one of those guys that killed her and not him or some hitman he hired.
Diane Matson is a former friend of Brando's.
He says somebody needs to put a bullet into that girl's head. And Duffy Hamilton says, yeah, that's right.
That's the same Duffy Hamilton who, under oath, testified that it was Blake who asked him to murder Bonnie.
There's absolutely no evidence that Christian Brando was on that street that night. None. He was in a different state.
Well, the major issue was the gunshot residue, because there were like very few particles of gunshot residue found on Robert Blake. The prosecution said 5 particles and the defense said 4 particles. And then the expert came out and said there's usually 100 or more particles of gunshot residue. And then the prosecution said, well, he could have easily wiped his hand. I mean, he went to a restaurant, like he could have shot her, went there, got the gun, washed his hands, come back out. So that became a kind of thing where it was like, did he have gunshot residue? Did he not have gunshot residue? In the end, the amount was so little that they couldn't conclusively say he did have it and it was linked and da-da-da. So it was like them not being able to say he did kind of effectively made it seem like he didn't. And then it was time for the verdict.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Robert Blake, not guilty of the crime of first-degree murder of Bonnie Lee Bakley.
He seemed shocked and wept openly in court when he heard the verdict of not guilty.
So I found this quote where after the acquittal, Robert Blake personally thanks Barbara Walters. Barbara Walters, God bless you, darling. I'd have never gotten out of this joint without you. God bless you, Barbara, wherever you are. It seemed like everything was behind him, except it wasn't, because although he beat the criminal case, there was still a civil case against him for wrongful death from Bonnie's family. They were suing him.
Do you recall instructing or seeing Earl Caldwell point a gun at Bonnie during that honeymoon trip?
I never instructed anybody to harm Bonnie.
Okay, we'll get to that.
No, we got to it right now.
Wasn't it true you hated Bonnie at the time of her murder?
That's a lie.
Do you feel Bonnie trapped you?
Early on when she got pregnant, yes.
Did you ride in the ambulance with your wife to the hospital?
No.
Why not?
I I didn't even really know she was gone.
Was it your intention to delay getting medical treatment to the car in case Bonnie was alive?
That's offensive, sir. And the answer is no.
Don't intentionally mean to offend. I'm just asking the questions.
It is nonetheless offensive.
You get mad at depositions?
No.
Mr. Blake to explain why he needed to park so far away from the restaurant the night Bonnie was murdered.
I parked a half a block away on a Friday night. I never park in parking lots. It's the closest place I could park. Are we going to stay on this?
No, I don't know.
Does he plan on raising Rosie, or is he going to get his daughter to raise Rosie? Because I think he'd be the most wonderful father.
I'm a better grandfather. I held a lot of anger for the media. I thought that Jay Leno was out to get me and the media was out to get me. But they're out to get everybody. Cook and eat. They're still digging at Princess Diana's bones 10 years after she's gone.
And there were a few differences in the civil case than there were in the trial. First, Robert Blake took the stand during the civil case. Second, the burden of proof is way less in a civil case than it is in a criminal case. Last, there was a witness, the girlfriend of the bodyguard that was accused of helping. Quote, during the trial, the girlfriend of Blake's co-defendant, Earl Caldwell, said she believed Blake and Caldwell were involved in the crime. He was found guilty of intentionally causing Bonnie's death, and he had to pay $30 million to the family. Well, soon after that, he declared bankruptcy, and then they tried to file an appeal. They didn't get the case reversed, but they got the 30 million reduced down to 15 million. But since he declared bankruptcy, he didn't really have to pay. And even now, in the aftermath of all of this, he has some tax liens and some debt, and his financials aren't doing so good. His career isn't doing so good. He had several final interviews. Like, there's one interview that I saw a while ago before I ever decided to do this case, and that's the interview I remembered when I decided to do this case, which was his interview with Piers Morgan in 2012.
I read your book.
Yes, that much you've
pretty
read.
much every detail of your life.
Yeah, and about Bonnie's life, and it's not about my relationship with Bonnie.
I'm not trying to
You're
drive anything
looking
into the ground.
foolish.
I'm not trying to drive anything into the ground.
I read a book about my life. I didn't write a book about that night, and I didn't write a book about Bonnie. You're just like the cops. Why would I marry her if I was going to kill her? What the matter with you?
I didn't say you killed her.
You didn't say I didn't.
A civil action was successfully brought against you for killing your wife.
What you think of me, I don't give
You don't know
what
what I
these
think of
people.
you.
Shut up for a minute. I don't really care what I think about me. Because you opened that door, Charlie Potatoes.
Hasn't it ruined your life?
What? That's another matter, Charlie. Go ahead, Charlie. Keep dancing. Bonnie had people that she burned. Did she steal everything from them? Something? We'll leave that alone. 15 ID cards. She had 15 credit cards, and nobody could ever find her if they were looking for her. I'm 79 years old. I've been this way since I was born. I'd argue with a goddamn rock and then try to beat it up.
Which of your Hollywood friends stood by you?
I don't have any Hollywood friends. Nobody stood by me. I live in an apartment. I told you. I'm broke. I couldn't buy spats for a hummingbird. There's no question that I'm very thin-skinned and I'm frightened. And there's no question, wait a minute. There's no question that I take things that you say too seriously.
A lot of people felt he's just passionate, he's Italian, like this is how Italian people are. Other people are like, dude, he seems unhinged. And that's the same thing that happened when he testified in the civil case. He was very passionate. He would get upset. He would start yelling. He seemed a little bit emotionally unstable. As for his daughter, Rose, remember his daughter with Bonnie, the one that was being raised by his eldest daughter? Well, she ended up doing an interview later on.
Did you ever ask about what happened the night that your mother was murdered?
No.
If your father truly murdered your mother, you don't want to know?
I don't want to know.
You don't want any resolution to that?
Not right now.
Not
I
right
don't
now.
think I'm ready.
Do you want to believe that your dad did not kill your mom?
Of course.
Yeah. Do you want to know one day the truth?
Someday, if it's ever an option.
The most recent thing about this case is that
Today, the walls of Blake's home are covered with his own bizarre handwritten scrawls. One says it's a sin not to dream. Others say no friends, no family, no wife, no kids, none.
You can see this crazy house that I live in. I'm still here. You bastards. I didn't die in that box. You got it? I'm still here. I'm still here. And you're still pounding a beat. Smoke that. Millionaires don't commit crimes. Things happen.
You holding up in this crisis?
I'm 86 years old. If it's time to go, it's time to go.
Bonnie's case is still unsolved. Those are the facts. Now, let's discuss the theories. So there are a few theories. The first one being that he did it. The second one is he didn't do it himself, but maybe he hired someone to do it. And then the third one is no, he didn't do it. He didn't hire someone to do it. Someone else did it. And then that can be a million different things. Like all those people she swindled, Christian Brando, did any of those people hire a hitman? You know, like the whole thing. So let's start with he did it. The first thing people point out is the fact that he was there and it happened like in his car and he was very upset with her. Like he seemed to have motive, means, and opportunity. And police say they investigated for almost a year, 11 months, and they knew there were other suspects. And regarding Christian Brando, they said that he was actually out of state. According to police, even though there's no direct physical evidence, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. And they also say it couldn't have been anyone else except for maybe a hitman that was affiliated with him, which is when people bring the hitman theory and also the bodyguard theory. Remember how police said that he had something to do with it? So the theory is that he and his bodyguard planned this, and his bodyguard was lying in wait with that vintage revolver with the serial code scratched, and that when Robert left, his bodyguard came, shot Bonnie, threw the revolver in the dumpster and left, and that was it. Even though Christian Brando was in another state, he also could have hired a hitman. Also, he was already shot someone else and went to jail for it. Then there's that tape recording of him threatening her or being like, well, not me, but someone's going to shoot you. So it's like a lot of people think it's either Robert Blake or Christian Brando, and they either did it themselves or hired a hitman. And then there is also a third theory, which is it's none of them, it's someone else. And when you look at the trail of destruction that Bonnie left, it's not hard to believe that not just a scorned lover, but maybe even a relative, a wife, a child. Remember, he took their life insurance, their wills, their money. She took. So even there was like one daughter that was so pissed. She was like, she didn't feel bad at all that Bonnie was dead. I'll be honest with you guys, with this one, I am stumped. I'm stumped. It could be people we are not even considering that have been hurt by Bonnie that have a vendetta against her. But then again, the opportunity, how would they know to follow her? Did she have a stalker? People say she had a stalker. Remember, that's why Robert Blake was carrying the gun, was that there was a stalker he was protecting her from. Could that person have done it? So anyway, I would love to know what you guys think. Me personally, what do I think? I don't have a straight answer for this one. I think it's split. 50% of me thinks it could still be Robert because he had a reason. He was there. He is a little bit, emotional, erratic. Maybe he felt that was his only option. The way he seemed so shocked and relieved when he was found not guilty. I got a little pang being like, I think he did it. But that's all. It's my gut instinct. So I don't know. Take it or leave it. That's 50%. The other 50% feels it could be a bunch of other people who I don't know. So that's kind of where I'm at. Let me know where you guys are at. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys. So weird. Thank you to today's sponsor of the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.